Last time on the Mythic Plus Saga, the climb up the 0.1% tidal mountain had finally commenced. Previously, I had spent months preparing tanks, setting up base camp, and convincing myself that Brewmaster Monk was the path forward this season. But then, glancing up the mountain, I realised something strange. For once, Retribution Paladin was actually competitive. So, at the end of Chapter 2, I had one question to answer. Was I actually going to climb as tank at all this season? The answer, it turns out, was no. I thought I had found my route up the mountain, but what I didn't realise at the time was that Ret Paladin may not have been the path to the summit either. It may have only been a false one. With our base camp established, Ret Paladin became the main focus of our first serious push up the mountain. And honestly, it felt incredible. While tanking is a very enjoyable role, it is also extremely high pressure and extremely stressful. I've taken to using the term tankxiety lately, and I swear it's a very real thing. Pushing keys as tank is legitimately taxing on your mental. So returning to the familiar melee DPS role, especially on a long-term main like Ret, felt very comforting. Ret had also had a recent change that drastically increased its power in Mythic Plus. Historically, one of Ret's biggest drawbacks has been its incredibly paddy damage profile. For a long time, it had very little priority damage in its kit, which is a really big issue in Mythic Plus situations. But come midnight, Execution Sentence had been reworked. It now deals 20% of all AoE damage done over the 10 seconds to its primary target. In other words, Ret had funnel. Like actual funnel. There was one slight problem though. It was insanely reliant on having a shaman in the group. A shaman's Sky Fury buff is roughly 10% DPS for a Retribution Paladin, since it causes our Apex talent to proc more frequently. At the time, it didn't seem like much of an issue though. Our healer, Shock, was a Restoration Shaman. So surely we're chilling here. This is also the point in the season where we began the climb as a dedicated team. Our nights were fairly sparse as everyone still had raid commitments, but after finding our young gun tank Jed on the streets of LFG, alongside Vod, Lysad, and the occasional appearance from the very handsome and humble Fred, we finally had a structured team for the initial climb. The next phase of the season is where title pushing most closely aligns with the metaphor of mountaineering. Climbers aiming for the tallest peaks will never reach the summit in a single push. Instead, they establish camps higher and higher up the mountain, with each camp becoming a new base of operations for the next part of the climb. In Mythic Plus, we can think of these camps like resilient keystone levels. Each breakpoint is progressively harder to reach, but once you get there, it gives you a new platform to push from. And on our ascent, multiple breakpoints posed a challenge. We made our way into 18s and 19s with relative ease, with only Elgathar Academy causing some real problems, specifically the final pull before the Dragon Boss. I wish we could say that we solved this quickly, but we bricked about 4 of our 19s here simply because we could not stop wiping on this pull. The first true bottleneck though hit in the plus 20s. Something I've noticed over previous seasons, particularly with the introduction of resilient keys, is that moving up to the next key level is often met with a lot of resistance. Not always because the key is like dramatically harder, but because there's this weird illusion of pressure when you only have one shot at the key. You would grind it up, finally get to the next key level that you need, only for one tiny brain fart to send you straight back down to where you started. It was basically like climbing to a higher camp, setting up for the next ascent, and then slipping on a turd 10 meters outside of the tent. Despite this, these little walls always managed to break down. I wish I could share some groundbreaking class discoveries here, but honestly, Ret still functions very similar to how it has in the past. The main takeaway is that pressing the free empowered Blade of Justice triggered from our Apex talent is the biggest DPS increase at the moment. Otherwise, this portion of the climb was basically just all reps. And honestly, that's a pretty good summary of Mythic Plus as a whole. There will be multiple points in the season when things suddenly feel really difficult. You'll hit a wall, question everything you're doing, and spend heaps of time doing homework. Most of the time the answer though is pretty simple. Just keep running the keys. Eventually the wall will break. Now, with the Ret climb feeling good, it was time for a detour. You didn't think I'd be doing this without any distractions, did you? Every expedition has side routes. This season's mountains seem to be absolutely littered with them though, at least on my journey. Some of these detours are purely for enjoyment, although I would often try to delude myself into believing that I was searching for some secret path that would make the climb easier. One of these side treks was Stulth, my rogue, who I played undercover for about a month for the purpose of exploring WoW from the perspective of a new player. Once that series was done, I did attempt to properly pick up Outlaw as a spec. On paper, it did make sense. Our current comp already had a Brewmaster Monk and a Restoration Shaman, so swapping to a dedicated physical comp wasn't really that extreme of a leap. The problem is though, Outlaw is really hard, at least for me. And realistically, even if I was playing it well, it's not even that much better than Retribution Paladin, even in a physical comp. At a certain point, I realized that I'd made a massive detour for the purpose of another video series, and was now trying to justify the time investment rather than writing it off for what it actually was, a side project. My Brewmaster Monk, Bogonk, was still being maintained quite frequently, actually. When we weren't playing as a group, I found it very hard to get into pug groups as Ret due to how heavily reliant the spec is on the Shaman buff. So quite often I would end up playing tank instead, just to get some practice in. This is a separate path to maintain, especially since I don't intend to push to the title as tank, but it does serve a different purpose. Recently, Blizzard released an exclusive mount and achievement for players who end up in the top 1% of the player base. For reference, the Mythic Plus title is at the top 0.1%. Given the premise of this series is to help others climb, Bogonk has become a slightly different mission. Helping others to the 0.1% title is my primary objective, but I also want to help as many people as I can climb to the 1% threshold. Pushing for title as tank would be extremely difficult. Pushing for the 1% mount as tank, definitely doable. So while Ret Pally remained the main route towards the summit, the Brewmaster path was still being maintained for this purpose alone. As the season developed, the meta started to solidify a little bit. The strongest route was no longer some vague theoretical thing, it had a very clear shape. Guardian Druid, Mistweaver Monk, Augmentation Evoker, Demon Hunter, and Unholy Death Knight. This was the main track that was forming in the snow. Our comp was not this exact setup, but for a while we were making our own version work. Brewmaster Monk, Resto Shaman, Demon Hunter, Paladin, Evoker. It had a lot going for it, the damage output was really solid, and Ret utility is actually quite good this season. Blessing of Freedom in particular is really good in a lot of dungeons. But there is a difference between working and the route that everyone else is using. The higher you climb, the more this difference matters as well. On top of that, as I said before, pugging became a nightmare. With everyone's raiding schedules, there was a lot of nights where I had to play outside of the team. And that's where Ret's weaknesses became a lot more obvious. Being on OCE makes the player pool pretty small already. Being a melee DPS makes it smaller again. Being a Ret Paladin that really needs a shaman in the group makes it feel like you're applying for keys from the bottom of a crevasse. As I mentioned before, this led to a lot of playtime on Brewmaster Monk. I actually managed to get Bogonk all the way up to 3850. At the time, this was only a few key levels shy of the 0.1% cutoff, which was sitting at around 3900. My Ret Paladin, playing mostly during push nights, made it right up to that threshold at 3900. But then, all of a sudden, it became very clear why the meta comp had developed in the first place. The comp wasn't the only culprit. There were a lot of evenings where we simply just couldn't play as a full group. But on top of this, with Ret being so awkward to pug, the title climb hit an absolute standstill. For 2 weeks, my ret didn't gain a single key level of meaningful score. And while we were stuck at camp, other climbers were just surging up the mountain. This is a rough feeling, but it does happen quite often. I hear people lament falling behind all the time. But it is a long season, and the climb is very rarely a smooth stroll to the top. We can think of this, I guess, as a period of acclimatization. Sometimes you have to stay at a higher camp a little longer than everyone else, getting used to the thinner air, while other players keep pushing ahead. It feels like you're falling behind, but sometimes you're just getting ready. The real turning point of this period of stagnation hit when Shock, our group's restoration shaman, selfishly decided to go descend the mountain and then go on holidays to Japan for 3 weeks. I'm joking about the selfish part, of course. Shock has been the linchpin that has held a lot of our previous climbs together. The man deserves a break from our stupidity. But with him gone, my ret had lost the restoration shaman that it relies so heavily on. On top of that, our tank Jed was heading into university exams and was then going on holidays after that. Our climbing group was in shambles. I could not, for the life of me, find pugs on most nights. At this stage, I really just wanted to play the game. I wasn't even too fussed about whether the climb went much higher than where I'd already gotten to. I just like climbing for climbing's sake. So one day, I was sitting in front of my PC and I thought, stuff it. Might as well level up a Death Knight. Everyone is saying that it's super strong, certainly beats sitting in LFG for hours. So yet another detour was carved. This one though was a little different. I really liked DK, and it was very easy to climb with. After hitting max level, I was having so much fun that I proceeded to play a 17-hour long session on a weekend, grinding as many plus 12s as I could possibly touch. Then one of OC's legends, Stim, dropped into my Twitch chat and asked, "Do you need Mythic raid on that?" Yeah, hell yeah I did. And in that raid, I proceeded to get not one,
I didn't realise I had the boggy streamer.
yes, but both best in slot trinkets.
Gaze. Oh my god, we're so good.
At this point, I felt like the mountain might have been trying to whisper something to me. Maybe this was the path. At this point, I went all in on Death Knight. I watched videos of other DK climbers. I dove into logs. I was obsessed. And the keys started to fall too. Within mere days, I was clearing camps that my ret had struggled with immensely. Having friends in the community helped a lot. Having my main score at 3.9k linked on the DK also helped. But in essence, I was still sprinting up the mountain. And that brings us to the present. 8 days ago, the Death Knight was sitting at the base of the mountain, not even planning to make an ascent. Now, it has overtaken the Paladin. The Death Knight has reached a higher camp than my long-term main, the character that I had spent months preparing, and the character that I thought was going to take me all the way to the top. The DK, in 8 days, has reached 3916 score. At the moment, the title cutoff is sitting just over 4k. So after all the planning, all the tank preparation, all the ret theory crafting, and all the other detours along the way, I think the route may have finally revealed itself. The summit is now clear. Or at least it looks clear. For the first time this season, I'm not climbing as tank. I'm not climbing on my main ret Paladin. I'm climbing as a Death Knight. This might be the real summit push.